Good evening. Do you ever wonder what happens to your identity? Is that an issue these days? It seems to be a topic that comes up a lot, and a lot of us are worried about it. So let's spend this evening. It's Wednesday, and I am Anna, and I welcome you to a Money Date. Let's spend this evening talking about identity theft particularly, and what are some things that we can be aware of. Hi Susan, good to have you. What are some things that we need to worry about or not worry about, and what are some things we can do? I also want to talk to you about understanding what does it actually mean to have your identity stolen. It is a horrible thing that can happen, but it doesn't mean that it has to happen to you. Before we get into the actual topic, I am excited. It's Wednesdays. We get to actually date our money. You guys, do you know how lucky you are if you can hop on and actually dedicate a few minutes of your precious time to pay attention? Hi, Bonnie. Good to have you here. To pay attention, right? Or at least reset your thinking in terms of what can you do for your finances. Now, I have a very structured approach. And for those of you who've been watching me for some time, you guys know what I want. I want to know how much money I've made over the last week. Good to have you here. Hi, Bunny. I want to know how much money I've made over the last week. I want to know where my spending is at. And I want to make sure that I check in with myself in terms of savings goals. Those are the three things that I always talk about on the Money Date. I'll tell you, yesterday I finally finished so once a month. So Money Dates are usually once a week, right? Wednesdays. And then beginning of the month, I sit down and look through all my finances, right? To make sure that everything is on streamlined, check the balances, paid off credit cards. So basically just kind of cleaned up the whole system. So I finished doing that yesterday, and it feels good. It doesn't take me an enormous amount of time. That is where the Money Date came in, because what I do, and I encourage you to do the same, whatever system you have, figure out how can you consistently come on and check with yourself. That's it. You guys, if you think that finances are complicated, if you think that approach to managing your finances is complicated, it is actually not. Hi Bob, good to have you here. What happens is that we ourselves create that complexity, right? We get busy, we get distracted, and things then just don't happen. So this is a topic that I want to cover every week on every Money Date because it does not end. But the idea here is that you become much more clear every time you come here, and you streamline your processes, and you are in charge, right? That's the key. So thanks again for those of you who are hopping on. Say hello, please, in the chat. That way I know you actually visited with me. And if you find this information useful, please share it out. I would appreciate it because I think this could be discussed with anyone. So a couple of things that we do on a Money Date before we get into the actual discussion of our main topic. I have a little bit of music playing in the background. So I want to share with you an awesome money win. A money win is something that has happened with me over the last week that I'm most proud of, right? And it does not necessarily has to do anything with my money. It does not have to do anything with the finances. It is just something that I found to be most proud of. And so I challenge you, as you sit and listen to me, pause back and reflect. What is one thing, or maybe you can come up with two things that actually took place over the last 7 days and that make you feel good, make you feel accomplished, that you're most proud of. That's, my friends, called gratitude. I am big on that. For those of you who been watching Money Dates for a while, I talk about it all the time. I do a gratitude journal every night, but this is kind of different. This is something that I found useful, and I actually started. I'll tell you something interesting. I started asking this question of my clients. A few of them gave me just a bit of a paused look and saying, like, what do you mean? Like, and you kind of have to get into it, right? To understand. So here's my money win. And then if you could share yours with me, just anything. Start with just looking at what you've got and appreciating just that one little thing that you didn't think was worth even mentioning. So my big money win, for those of you who don't know yet, I was featured in New York Times business section this weekend. Is one of the front cover business section articles, which I am most proud of, because not only I got to represent my own company, hi Mindy, good to have you here, but I also was sort of the leading person for the two biggest networks that support advisors like myself. Okay, so I was overjoyed and overexcited, and so many people found that to be such a cool thing. I actually, honestly, I did not put that together until the article came out, and because I was just interviewed by the reporter and they did a photo shoot, I had no idea. So I was just more than overexcited and humbled to be able to do that. But the idea for me, every time I talk to the reporters, is how can I help more people? How can I help you, right, be better with your finances? Hi, Jeremy. Good to have you here. So that is my big money win. I'm going to be talking about it for a while because I feel like that is something that everybody needs to know. And you know what's funny is that the title of the article was not rich, yet, question mark. You need to hire an advisor that can work with you either by the hour, by paying them a project fee, or you can pay them monthly. And I thought about this for a while, right? I never thought that you can put in context how advising and finances can be sort of looked at in terms of, hey, maybe you're not rich yet, but there are things that you can work on, including what we talk on Money Dates about every week, that kind of gets you closer to becoming rich, if that's your goal, or being better with your finances. So thanks so much for watching, you guys. I appreciate it. That is my big money win. It's not just for this week. It's a big win for my career, my accomplishments, and it just shows that there is a need and there's a service. So I'm most excited and most proud of that. All right, I want to get into, so you guys are hopping on. Thanks so much again for those who are joining us now or watching in replay. I thank you again. Please share this out. Give me some likes. I appreciate that. Now, let's get into the actual nitty-gritty details of identity theft. Maybe it's not the most exciting topic, but I still want to cover some of these things because I think it's important to be on the lookout for signs, okay, for warnings. What is happening and why is this happening? Because I think a lot of times we tend to not see it right away, right? So you aren't going to become pros, but at least next time you hear something, you see something, you're going to be more alert to what's happening. So what is identity theft? Well, first of all, it's a crime. Hi, Lindsay. Good to have you here. So it is a crime for which somebody can actually go to jail. So I don't know if you knew that, but that is very definition of identity theft. So that's number one. So I don't think you are on the side of things of wanting to commit a crime. But if this is something that has happened to you right before, hi Gore, good to have you here. So it's just when somebody steals your personal information, right? Or takes it without a permission. So it could be a variety of things, and I'm going to go into discussing what they are. It could be all the way from personal identifying information such as social security number, your name is a big one, right? And anything that really truly is personal or belongs to you and not for public use. So here are some identity theft types, right, that it kind of exists. And the one that actually are two that are the most concerning to me are child identity theft, because that can go undetected for years, and then seniors, okay? Seniors are the most vulnerable group of individuals, right, for these kinds of things. And a lot of it has to do with financial, right, because they're exposed to, maybe having caregivers come around and they're exposed to being forgetful and just some of the things that kind of happen to you as you age. And so that group gets to be affected the most. Now, there are things that, there are types such as tax identity theft? So imagine somebody files a tax return on your behalf, which is great, right? I wouldn't be excited about that. But no, that's not what you need to be excited about. They file your tax return on your behalf, and they want to, first of all, it probably is incorrectly filed tax return, but it's fraudulent, right? And so the idea with that is that they are exposing themselves to getting a refund. Hi, Johnny. Good to have you here. Medical, right? That's another big one. If somebody got a hold of your health insurance, right? And we are kind of in an arena right now where health insurance is a big sort of question mark for a lot of people. It's expensive. The whole Obamacare is crappy. And I'm going to say this out loud. I'm not afraid to say that because I am one of those individuals who's actually paying for it. Yes, it's available to everybody, but it costs a lot of money. So do I like it? No. Do I have it? Yes. So medical type of identity theft, when somebody actually gets a hold of your health insurance information, and check this out, Medicare, right? This is the old age insurance. This is when you turn 65 and you have coverage. So can somebody use that? When I finally sat down to do research a little bit on this topic, I was surprised that I couldn't even comprehend, how can I use somebody else's insurance to get medical procedures done? So it's just like, it doesn't kind of add up in my mind, because I wouldn't think that. Now, social, you guys, hi Chris Wooden, good to have you here. We are on the social platforms all day long. You are watching me on one of them right now. Imagine if somebody got a hold of my password and my username and was able to log into my account. It's probably possible. 2 days ago, I talked about password protection, right? And some of the tips and things that you can set around having strong passwords. So we are, as individuals living in the modern world, are very vulnerable to being exposed to all of these kinds of things. So can we prevent it? We could probably work on putting some steps in place to be less exposed to some of these things, but I don't think we can entirely prevent it. Just like with passwords, I talked about this. There's only so many things we can do, and hackers get smarter by the day. They come up with all kinds of schemes and ideas of how to get what they want. So I guess the first thing is not to worry about it until it happens to you, but be aware. That's my message for you today. So, all right, now let's shift gears a little bit. We understand the different types of identity theft. So it's not all financial, right? Because it could be totally horribly wrong if somebody took your name, right? And what if you are a famous person, right? Or what if you established your name somewhere, right? In some industry, in society, and somebody somehow takes that. It's horrible. I don't know if it's worse than a financial crime or financially related kind of a theft. So now, what happens if, how do you actually tell if identity theft has occurred to you, right? Because it's not obvious right away, because things will have to go on for some time, right, in order for this to work, or for it to progress, not to work. So I have my notes here on the side. So some of the things to point out. So let's say you get a notice from the IRS that that lists or credit report has unfamiliar credit accounts. I talk about this a lot, you guys, too, and we're going to spend a little bit later in this month a whole week talking. Hi, AJ, good to have you here. Talking about credit report and what are some of the things you need to do. So I always advocate for checking your credit report at least once a year, right? If not 3 times a year, because you're always eligible to do that. So you get a notice from the bank that there was a withdrawal done from your account, right? That's when you know that there's a red flag and something is going on, right? You get bills in the mail that don't belong to you, right? You know that you don't have account in that name, but that bill keeps coming back to your mailing address, right? You get phone calls from creditors to say you owe a specific debt, but it's not something that actually you created, right? Medical bills, I talked about medical identity theft. You get notifications that you owe for certain services, right? Or you go to use your health insurance and it's denied, or right, because it says, for example, that you've exhausted your limit for these particular services, and you're like, what the heck, I haven't even used my health insurance this year or this period of time. And I talked about social platforms, right? What are the stuff, when you log into certain accounts, right? Do they look different? Does if something feels off, it is probably off. Okay, so I am more of a gut feel kind of person, right? So if my gut tells me that something is not right, I better listen, right? I better explore and do some research and think about it, but I better not let that feeling go. I think a lot of these things also could be put in that direction as well. So don't just sort of neglect and say, oh, that's normal. No, normal does not look like that. Okay, so those are some of the examples and some of the ideas. Obviously, when you get a call from the bank and they say your debit card was compromised, of course, right? We know, or your credit card was compromised. We know that that's the case. Well, so what happens, and what if that happened, and what can we do going forward, right? So what are some things you can do right away? I found a very neat resource, okay? It's identitytheft.gov, and I'll post it in the comments. So identitytheft.gov. So there's a whole site that has a ton of useful resources. What to do, what are some of the things to watch out? So some of these things and tips I picked up from kind of doing the research, but check that out. So if there is a suspicion, that's what you need to be thinking about. So all right, let's go through the steps in terms of if something does go wrong and you're trying to figure out where do you stand? Who do you notify? So, let's say that maybe a credit card notified you that your credit card was compromised. Actually, last year, my debit card, 2016, end of 2016 to early 2017, my debit card that I don't use quite a bit was compromised twice. Okay, and I got a call from my bank. So what if something like that happens to you? Notify, right? Contact those institutions, right? Contact those organizations and let them know that something is not right, right? If they contact you, that's great, right? Then they probably have measures in place to help those kinds of things not occur. All right, changing passwords, those are the sort of progression. Change your passwords, change your logins. If this is a serious situation and you have to change your bank account, so if you have changed banking institutions, then that's what you do. When you go through the identitytheft.gov website, they actually have a step-by-step instructions what you can do. You fill out a report, they give you precise things to do depending on what kind of crime or event has happened, right? Now, this thing I like very much. So if we need to, we can place a 90-day alert on our credit report. It's a free service that allows the three biggest credit agencies, TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax, right? I can never pronounce this word. Equifax was hacked back in August of last year. So much for using their services, right? Because they're the ones that reporting a lot of credit data on us. But you can notify them and ask them to put a 90-day alert. It's actually free. I learned that after 90 days, you can actually renew to start monitoring your credit report. Because if some of your private information was taken, it is probably gonna take some time for these things to start popping out. Okay, somebody maybe took your social security number and your name, so watch out maybe for them trying to open various accounts. So those kinds of measures, right, would be necessary or helpful, right, in order for you to go through that. Also, make sure that once you put that credit monitoring in place for 90 days, you actually get a confirmation from all of those credit agencies. Because if you don't, that means it's actually not on. That's a key component to that. You can also pull your credit report, freeannualcreditreport.com. You get your free credit report. You look through that to make sure that nothing on it that actually doesn't belong to you. Okay. Now, FTC, Federal Trade Commission, this is another great resource where you can actually report a crime. I mentioned to you that identity theft is a crime, and that is something that You don't just, you take these steps, you change your passwords, you put credit monitoring things in place, but you actually, if it's a serious event, you have to do something about it, okay? So that's one place where you can actually file a report, okay? So now, because that creates a record of something actually taking place. The other piece that you can do is actually find a police report, right? So why is that important? Because maybe this crime is happening next door, right? I'm traveling this week, right? I'm staying at the hotel. And first of all, one of the things, I'll talk about this later, but I use my own private, it's called VPN network. So that nobody can get on my Wi-Fi, right? Because I have my computer here, I have my personal information, I have my emails and things like that. So you never know, maybe that hacker is sitting next door, or you go to Starbucks and they're sitting right next to you. So filing a police report, again, is also one of those steps that I recommend for you to take. Now, obviously, right, if something does happen, it comes up to be pretty stressful, right? Because you've never done this before. It's not like something we're taught in school. By the way, I wasn't even taught a lot about this in my financial planning courses. I was just not. I knew it existed, right? But it wasn't something that it's like, okay, well, you need to become proficient and understanding and knowing how to manage your identity, right? Or identity theft, right? There are these things that we kind of learn as we go. So I guess, take a deep breath and don't panic, but start sort of going into the process of understanding that there's going to be work. That's the downside of a lot of these things that happen with the information that's being stolen. Because again, remember, we live in the world where a lot of this is exposed, whether we really want it or we don't, right? We have our phones. It's just, I can go on about how it's exposed. It's just understanding what can you do to be safe with it, okay? So take a deep breath, figure out what are your steps, and start actually working on them. Now, I always hope that nothing like this happens to any of you in your lifetime, but what are some things that we can put in place, right? And be thinking about next time that we go out in the world and look at these, these events, or you see something's happening to, somebody else. So how do we actually prevent it? Because there's a way to prevent it, right? Because we can't completely isolate ourselves from it. So I talked about strong passwords, right? That's kind of a no-brainer number one kind of thing to do. I cannot tell you enough about how useful the password managers are, but you have to buy into the idea that you have to trust them with their service that they're providing and storing your passwords. Okay, that's really what it comes down to. Now, if you want to have your passwords, written down and carry it in your purse in a little notebook, do that. Some people, there are all kinds of creative ways. Don't use the same password. That's another thing too. I see this with my clients a lot, especially for your financial accounts. Don't use the same password for all of your accounts. Come on, be a little bit more thought through with this process, okay? Now, I know that we get solicited a lot with all kinds of information, right? Or for requests for information. So next time somebody's asking you for something, don't just take it for granted. So if somebody's asking you for your name, for your address, even some of these things that if there's just, it should be sort of a light bulb going off in the back of your head saying, well, why do you need this information? Do you really need to have my social security number? Do you need my name? Do you need my address? Even those things I am suspicious about, because why, right? It's, if you really want to, you can find out. This information is public, but don't just volunteer, right? Be careful with your own personal stuff. Now, this is where a lot of stuff also happens, is through our mail. That a lot of identity theft happens through mail. So, and because there's a lot of sensitive information. Hi, Acharna, good to have you here. There's a lot of personal information being passed in the mail. So if you're going on vacation, don't forget to put a hold on your mail. Don't just let it pile up, in your mailbox so it's overflowing and maybe just kind of being just loose out there somewhere. Hi, Karen. Good to have you here. So, kind of going, for those of you who are hopping on, we just finished talking about identity theft and all the different types and how to prevent it, or how to be on the lookout for it. Now we're kind of diving into what are some of the things that you can actually put in place today to make sure, right, and be cognizant of it. Okay. All right, we talked about pulling your credit report, but here's a big one that was really relevant back in this was end of August of 2017 when Equifax had a breach of their database. Credit freeze. So I'm talking about credit freeze. Hi, Lisa. Good to have you here. Okay, so if you feel like that's going to be a tool that's going to help you, give you more protection and you can sleep better at night because of that, do that. I'm not against credit freezes, but I sort of employ a more proactive approach to checking my credit report every 4 months, and kind of staying on the top of it. You can. There are downsides to credit freezing, and I actually had a couple of examples with my clients where they weren't able to pull certain information. One of them being Social Security report, right? Because credit freeze is ideal when you don't think you're going to use your accounts, right? You don't think you're going to buy anything on credit, so the lenders don't need to pull it, and that's helpful. So if you think that's where you are, do it. I don't disagree with that, but it's just it is definitely an additional layer of protection. Okay, all right. Now here's a good one too. So when you get your bills in the mail, right, and you know that. So if you're with me flowing through these money dates, I talk about this as well. You have a certain structure of how you pay your bills, right? I do mine. I mentioned this already today. I just finished everything yesterday because it's usually the beginning of the month. Everything is said. Everything is going to be paid off by the 15th of the month, and I'm done. I don't have to worry about anything. But what happens if all of a sudden, right, in my perfect system that I have, I get a bill that is somewhat outside of my cycle? Right? So start thinking about why all of a sudden the due date on a certain bill or a certain invoice has changed, right? So without any kind of notifications, letters by mail, email, or phone calls, none of that should take place. So if you are starting to see that, that's a red, a light bulb that should be going off in your head, okay? If something does happen like that, you need to call your financial institution and just figure out, okay, why? If your credit card used to be due on one certain date and then it changed to like from 15th to, 25th of the month, then something is off with that. All right, mobile devices. How many of you have mobile devices? I'm sure everybody, right? I'm talking to you on one right now. So what kind of password protection do you have, or security protection? Let's use that word. Do you guys have a password on your phone so that nobody can get in? Yuri actually gets really annoyed with me because I have a password and it's really just like my thumb, right? So obviously I can put a password in there, but I open it with my thumb. I have an iPhone. He gets annoyed and says, well, why do you need to have that? Because what if something happens and I cannot get into your phone? Well, the idea is that you don't need to get into my phone. It's not that I'm hiding anything. It's for the protection of the information that I have on there. Now, so that's one, right? Number two is those apps and, various tools you've downloaded on your phone. What kind of security protection do you have there? Do they have the two-step verification process, right? The additional layer of security where the code is generated every time you log in and it's sent to your device, right? Your email, that's where a lot of stuff actually happens. You won't believe how many bogus emails I get from clients, right? It looks like, because when I see a client's name, I react to it, right? I open it, but sometimes it looks weird and say, all right, here's something, click on this link. I never do that because that is not safe. Okay, so it's not just the mobile devices, it's your tablets, it's your computer. Like, what kind of systems do you have? I talked about this a little bit. I used my own private network, so I do not use anybody's Wi-Fi. I pay a little bit extra per month to make sure that I have unlimited internet connection, so that I travel a lot, so that's helpful, but then I don't have to worry about running out of data, but that also gives me the ability, right, use my own hotspot. So I don't have to connect to the hotel Wi-Fi, Starbucks Wi-Fi, any of them. So it's my own. But then also what I have is, in this company, I'm blanking a name, I can put it in the comments, it's the Virtual Private Network. Hi Ray, good to have you. So I have so I can connect to that service, right? And it creates my own, even though I'm on my private Wi-Fi, I can create this extra network, so that kind of puts more walls around my connection. And I am dealing with a lot of personal information that you guys are providing to me. So I have to have extra layers. And you know, things like, I put everything online in terms of where my statements are delivered. I don't collect receipts. Everything is sort of electronic, so that if it gets lost, right? First of all, I don't want to shred all that stuff, but that's if you're one of the types of the clients that I have that like to get everything in the mail, create a shredding system, right? Don't just throw your bills that you don't need anymore, or statements, right? Investment account statements, bank statements, any kind of financial statements in the trash. It does not belong there. That document needs to be shredded. You also need to understand that there are certain documents you need to hold on to for a while until you filed your tax return. And then when you file the tax return, after that, you've got to store that information somewhere. So think about where you're putting those sensitive kind of documents, and can you actually get them shredded? There are shredding services, right, that you can explore in your neighborhood, that if you've piled up all that information, right, and you have it in filing cabinets, you can actually get it shredded. I know UPS, there's a UPS store by my office. They have, you actually bring a box, right, you put all your papers in the box, they weigh the box, and then you actually pay them by the weight, which is fine, and there's a big shredding machine, and so I actually just dump it in there, and I see it being shredded, so I don't just dump my box and, right, God knows who's going to look through it. Yes, and so, I mean, the last thing, Staples does that, Acharna. Okay, I didn't know that. Yeah, I would assume they do. It's not, I mean, even though they weigh it, it's not very expensive. And believe me, I do actually have a little dinky shredder in the office, but it's going to take me ages to just do page by page. So, hi Patrice, good to have you here, right? And again, think about where, I guess it's more common sense than we think about how can we protect things that are most vulnerable to others, right? And remember that identity theft is a crime and it can happen to anybody. So practice these tips and ideas I shared with you. And if you see something that is off, or somebody's talking about it or complaining about it, use the resources that are available. So identitytheft.org and FTC have a lot of good resources, right? So I do not ever want to hear from you that something like this happened, but if it did, reach out and let me know how I can be helpful. Hi Alberto, good to have you. Okay, so I'm about to close. You'll have to hop back on and watch it in replay, but I do have a quote for you. I always close with one, and I don't know, it's just funny. I have to look up who this guy is, but it says, I don't need to worry about identity theft because no one wants to be me. So I'd like to think that, and this is Jay London, but nobody wants to have my identity. So anyway, that's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you so much for hopping on. Let me know what tips or ideas you have around this subject, questions as well. Okay, and don't forget, if you have not started on the path of having your own money dates, granted it's not Wednesdays, pick another day of the week. I don't really have a preference. I started on Sundays and switched to Wednesdays because Sundays are somewhat, relaxing days. So, but do something, okay? Do something about your finances. Thanks so much again. Please share this out, and I'll see you guys next week.